genuinely felt like my life was over after I herniated a disc in my low back, which left me bedridden for days with excruciating sciatica. The pain was so bad that I couldn't sleep, I couldn't sit in a chair, and I could barely even put my socks on. I struggled to stand up for more than a few minutes without my leg or my foot going numb. I legitimately feared falling in the shower like an old lady in a Life Alert commercial. A few days later, I developed foot drop, which basically just means that I lost motor control in my foot and my ankle. I could not dorsiflex my foot. If I attempted to walk around, every time that my heel would touch the ground, my toe would involuntarily slap on the ground and I could not pick it up when taking the next step. This is probably the most terrifying thing that I've ever experienced. Physical pain is one thing, but the mental anguish from losing the ability to use my body was soul-crushing. I completely understand what people mean when they say that their back pain is driving them crazy now. And with the sleepless nights, I had nothing better to do than to just research obsessively for any information I could find on how to free myself from pain. And thank God, because some guy on Reddit from like 7 years ago saved my life when he linked a very controversial YouTube video from back in like 2013. In this video, a guy suffering the same exact symptoms that I was made a full recovery in about 45 days with no surgery, no peptides, nothing. What I'm about to show you goes completely against everything that you think you know about back injuries. I want to explain the diet, supplementation, and mindset that went into this, but some of the exercises actually included squats and deadlifts. That's right, I herniated a disc in my back with deadlifts, and I healed my back with deadlifts. Before we get into that, let me just explain why the injury happened so you can avoid this entirely. So if you rewatch the video, it's obvious that this was a classic case of ego lifting and bad form. But with that said, this was 455 pounds and I was going for 2 to 3 reps. A few weeks prior, I actually hit 500 pounds. And there's a couple of reasons why I still injured myself even though I was using less weight. Earlier that day, I had broken a 36-hour fast. So yes, I was fatigued from the fast, but during this 36-hour fast, the way that you suppress your appetite a lot of the time is by drinking water. And in putting my body into that flushing state with no food to retain the water and also just drinking a ton of extra water to suppress my appetite, I was dehydrating myself. Drinking too much water is dehydrating. I'll make a whole other video on that topic. Now, in case you didn't know, the discs in your spine are actually comprised of fluids and mostly water. Now, the key here is that the water in your discs is non-essential to survival, and in times of dehydration, your body will pull from these places to support other bodily processes. And when your discs get dehydrated, they compress, almost like an accordion or a slinky. If you combine that with the fatigue from the fast, the fact that I did squats right before that, and the bad form, it's just a deadly combination. I was asking for an injury. Basically what happened is a few inches off the floor, I felt a pop in my upper glute and lower back area, and it shot a pulse down my leg, almost felt like electricity, right into my foot into the ground. I dropped the weight, super confused, sitting there disoriented, honestly just freaking out because I wasn't sure what to do. And what I decided to do next was actually a big mistake. I sat down for like 10-15 minutes and didn't move. What do people tell you to do when you hurt your back? They say, oh, sit down, don't move, just rest. The problem with this is you are setting your body up to stiffen and tighten up solid as a rock. What I would later learn in my research from a guy named Brendan Backstrom, he has an account called Low Back Ability, is that tightness is more of a protection mechanism. It's not indicative of an injury. So in this case, my body did not trust me not to continue hurting myself, so it tightened up. I should have gotten up and taught my body, you're not as hurt as you think that you are. This is actually something that I referenced to one of my clients, Truman, about a week or two later when he hurt his back. So after sitting there like 10 minutes, I decided I gotta go home, and I somehow unracked my weights off the deadlift bar, hobbled out of the gym into my Uber, really struggled on the car ride home. This guy's hitting all sorts of potholes, just destroying my back. It was like lightning every time he hit a bump. I get home, I hobble inside, I get up the stairs somehow, and I lie in bed for a night of agony. My roommate gave me some sort of a CBD cream that didn't work, and I started eating ibuprofen like candy. I barely slept that night, and when I awoke in the morning, I was hoping that I wouldn't have any pain, and it got much worse from there on. This is where I realized that putting my socks on was impossible. I could not sit in a chair. I had like 2 or 3 client calls that day, and there was no chance I was going to sit at my desk. And this is where I realized I couldn't stand up for more than 2 to 3 minutes without my leg and my foot going numb. I was in the shower and afraid that I was going to fall over and crack my head on the tub or something. So at this point, I'm sure you could tell I'm just bugging out. And I might seem like somebody who can stay on top of their diet 24/7 with no issue, but the day after the injury, I actually ate an entire pepperoni pizza in my bedroom. I was watching a whole bunch of Dave Portnoy pizza reviews. I actually ate a bunch of donuts. Crumb cake donuts are my favorite. It was around Halloween, so I was eating a bunch of candy too. And the problem with this is it just drove up the inflammation in the injury. I was already pretty hopeless at this point, but it was about 2 or 3 days of agony later that I realized I was developing foot drop. I noticed that I couldn't stand on my heels without my toe dropping to the ground. Try it right now, I just couldn't do that. And over these days, I was looking looking for all sorts of stretches and remedies to improve my condition, and they said that walking was probably one of the best things that I could do to get blood flow to the area. And as I was walking, my toe would drag on the ground, or when I would take a step and my heel would touch my foot, the rest of my foot, my toe would just slap on the ground involuntarily. This is a telltale sign of nerve damage. If I didn't fix this relatively soon, it would have been permanent, which was freaking me the hell out. So as I said earlier, I could not sleep at night, and I had nothing better to do than to research, and this is where I found that video that changed everything. From here forward, I'm going to reference all the content and people and accounts responsible for helping me make a recovery in record time without any peptides, surgery, or any performance enhancing drugs of any sort, all natural remedies and things that you can find at your local gym. So again, this was a guy on Reddit from like 7 years ago that referenced this video, which changed everything. I don't know who the Reddit account is, but God bless you. Anyway, the video that you want to look up on YouTube is called Back Injuries with Mac Ward. It's on the Starting Strength YouTube channel with Mark Ripito. In this video, Mac Ward is being interviewed by Ripito, and he's explaining how he was stationed in Afghanistan back in like 2013, and he was suffering the same exact symptoms and injuries that I was, and he had to make a recovery in about 30 days, otherwise he would be medically discharged from the military. He was in the Air Force, and he needed his ability to dorsiflex his foot so that he could operate the pedals on the plane, and he couldn't do that because of the foot drop. And that's all on top of the low back pain, the sciatica shooting down his leg. I think he even said that he puked at his desk one day because the pain was so bad. Mac had no idea what to do, so what he did was he called Ripito. Now, Mark Ripito has gyms across the country, has a book called Starting Strength. His entire philosophy is focused on improving functionality and longevity into the later years of life with barbell movements such as squat, deadlift, bench press, bend over barbell row, stuff like that. So he's literally got old ladies doing deadlifts and stuff like that. And Mark said something to Mac that completely changed my mindset on this topic. He said, everything heals but cancer. Obviously, if you chop your arm off, it's not going to grow back like a lizard's tail would. But this is where I realized that I can fix my situation if my mind can rise to the occasion. 90% of this recovery is going to be mental. Mark referenced an article written by Austin Baraki on aches and pains, and it really talked about the concept of pain, like what it actually is and what it is not. And this is where I realized that pain is a signal. Pain is not indicative of whether or not you were injured. The psychology of pain is a very nuanced topic. I am not telling you to train through the pain. One of the key concepts that Mark and Mac talked about in this interview is there is a difference between good pain and bad pain. And this is what led me to the realization that I had to build up the damaged or sensitive muscles in my low back like paper mache over time without agitating the injury. I cannot continue to agitate my back. That is not the goal, because your pain receptors, they're almost like muscles. So if you just constantly keep firing your pain receptors, they're going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and then it'll start anticipating the pain more and more and more. And this is how people develop chronic pain over the course of their life. That was not my goal. So low key, when it comes to pain, you got to gaslight yourself into success. Train through the discomfort, but know the difference between good pain and bad pain. So with all this said, Mac decided that he was going to squat and deadlift. That's how he was going to avoid being medically discharged and being sent home from Afghanistan. He went and told his higher up. The guy said, okay, be careful. And about 45 days later, Mac's foot drop was gone, and he was also able to perform the physical test, which allowed him to avoid being medically discharged. So after hearing all this, though I was nervous, I was ready to commit. I was desperate. I did not want to deal with this pain anymore. I wanted to get fixed as fast as possible with no surgery, no drugs, or anything. And what I decided to do was I shared the injury video. I didn't want to hide this from my audience, and I was overwhelmed with the amount of people that reached out to me. I got to give a big shout out to Ajax. He reached out to me personally. He had been through this before, and he gave me a bunch of tangible advice for how I could improve my condition and relieve myself of pain. One of the pain relief methods that he mentioned to me, which nobody else told me about, is called body tempering. Highly recommend you check that out if you're looking for pain relief. Personally, one of the most notable things I did for short-term pain relief was go to a chiropractor. He put a laser on me. He did all sorts of crazy stuff to me, and honestly, I ended up discontinuing the service, but I can't deny those initial adjustments that he gave me really helped with the pain, and he also helped me discover like what the actual problem was. This is where I discovered that I was dealing with an L5-S1 disc herniation, and that also it was putting pressure on my perennial nerve, which is why I was experiencing the foot drop. I'll get to the diet and supplementation in a moment, but I want to get back to my return to the gym. 5 days after the injury, I went back to the gym and I did an upper body workout. I decided, hey, motion is lotion. I got to get blood flow to the affected area so that I can actually deliver the micronutrients that are going to repair the damaged and sensitive muscles. I could not do bench press regularly. I had to have my feet up on the bench to keep my back nice and flat because anything past extension into hyperextension was really painful for me. The worst thing that you can do when you're injured is stay put. The problem with staying put is that you're just going to further atrophy muscles, especially in the surrounding area of the injury. Further atrophy is just going to cause more imbalance and more pain, and then you're just stuck in a loop of never getting better. The most basic advice I could give is do what you can. Initially, I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up without my foot going numb. But about 3 or 4 days in, I decided to go for a walk. I could only make it 10 minutes before my foot got way too tired and my toe was dragging on the ground. It was annoying and whatnot. But just little by little, I was building up the strength like paper mache, layer by layer by layer by layer. And back to this first return to the gym, at the end of that upper body workout, I decided to do some deadlifts. Now, I obviously didn't load up 455 on the bar. I put 65 pounds on the bar. 65 pounds. This is the most humbling thing that I've done in a long time. The 10-pound plates on either side of the 45. And I did perfect deadlift form along with Mark Ripeto's deadlift tutorial. I recommend his deadlift and squat tutorials to all my coaching clients because they are perfect. They break it down to a simple set of steps that is impossible to mess up. And at the end of the day, this is a form issue. So I had to correct my form so I could build strength on top of that solid form and build the muscles that I was trying to target with stuff like the squat or the deadlift. And over the next few weeks, I built up from 65 to 135 to 185 to 225 to 275 all the way to 315 in a matter of 3 weeks. 7 weeks in, I hit 365. 10 weeks in, I hit 385. And after that, I was repping 365 for reps. Now I'm back to the point where I'm doing 405 for reps. And this is what I mean, just little by little building it up like paper mache without agitating the injury. I was extremely cognizant of the difference between the good pain and the bad pain. Anytime it felt a little sketchy, I just said, let's call this a win. We'll get back to it next week. And I would come back stronger and stronger and stronger. And in a matter of a couple weeks, the foot drop disappeared. I was walking better. I was able to dorsiflex my foot. And I want to get into some of the other exercises that really helped me. As I mentioned earlier, Brendan Backstrom from Low Back Ability, he put me onto the back extension. I started off with just my body weight, supporting my body with my arms. Then I was doing holds. Then I was doing, 10 to 15 reps. Then I was doing a little bit of weight. And now I'm doing back extensions with 180 or 200 pounds attached to my body. What I realized with this exercise and what Brendan shined light on is that you are not like a stiff board. You shouldn't have to bend over with perfect deadlift form to pick up a box off the ground in your house. You should just be able to bend over like a slinky and pick it right up. You're not a stiff board. You're like a cobra because you have all these intraspinal muscles going in and throughout your vertebrae. So by training the low back and honestly the whole spine with something like a back extension or a Jefferson curl, you can really build your own back brace and bulletproof your back so that this is never anything you have to deal with. One of the other crucial concepts that I think really helped me make this recovery in record time that I got from Brendan is that you need to build evidence and give your body evidence that you are not as hurt as you think that you are. So that's what I mean by little, building my muscles up like paper mache, performing the exercises and helping my body realize this is not painful. This is maybe uncomfortable right now, but little by little, the pain just disappeared. Also want to give a big shout out to my good friend, Luis Castellon. He's somebody that I reached out to regularly. He's an expert in physical therapy, injury recovery, and also injury prevention. And he wraps bodybuilding into it very well. And that's why I reached out to him constantly. Luis had me doing a bunch of banded exercises for my hip adduction and abduction. It's pretty crazy how intertwined your hips are into your low back and your hamstrings. The adduction and abduction machine was very useful in my recovery, also very awkward. I got the stink eye from all the girls in my gym regularly. Another exercise I did early on and not so much as time went on was a reverse hyperextension. A lot of gyms aren't going to have this machine, but I did watch a video from one of my favorite OG fitness YouTubers, Chris Beast Mode Jones, in which he shows how he rigs it up with minimal equipment in his gym. I also did a lot of dead hangs for relief to decompress the spine. And eventually a few months later, I did get an inversion table so that I could decompress my spine from my ankles down. You basically hang upside down like a bat. It's good for a number of other reasons though. You get blood flow to the head. It's actually good for your digestion somehow. I still do it to this day for those reasons. And another exercise that is very underrated for improving low back pain is going to be the overhead press, standing barbell, just standing military press. All that pressure, that's all just core strength. And this is going to lead me to a big point that I really want to impress upon you. Your core is not just your abs. The reason that the entire country and honestly the entire world has low back pain is because everybody's training their abs and their obliques, but they're really neglecting their low back, which is just as much of your core as your abs. Which is why now, even though I've made a full recovery with my back, I still have the back extension in my plan. I still do squats and deadlifts. I still do overhead press. I still do all these exercises which strengthen my low back so that I'm structurally sound from head to toe. And with that said, let's get into the diet and the supplements. So as I said, the day after the injury, I had an entire pizza in my bedroom. I had a bunch of comfort food. All these processed foods are just going to drive up inflammation. So I actually got up to like 185 pounds, and I was eating ibuprofen like candy. But later I found that that is really tough on your kidneys. I probably did some damage that I'm still undoing today, but I didn't want to take those anymore. And one of the main selling points of the carnivore diet is diminishing inflammation, especially in old injuries, but just inflammation in general. Anybody dealing with elbow, ankle, knee issues, I highly encourage you at least try the carnivore diet. It wasn't a good long-term solution for me, but it definitely helped reduce some inflammation in that injury in the short term. I also lost 11 pounds in like 6 days, but I felt dreadful. So what I reintroduced was things like orange juice, which can lower inflammation in your gut. You really want to steer clear of refined sugars, but OJ is something that you can keep in. Another thing is pineapple, which has bromelain, which is really going to help reduce inflammation. I was definitely still drinking the Playboy potion, which the main ingredient in there that is going to help with this is going to be pomegranate juice. It's going to promote better blood flow. Blood flow will deliver the micronutrients that will help repair the injury. It'll also help bust up the calcium deposits in your arteries and help shuttle those into your bones, which leads me to supplementation and vitamin D3 plus K2. Dr. Eric Berg is the one who put me onto vitamin D3 as a way to diminish low back pain. So some people will take 800 IUs of vitamin D3. Some people take 5,000, maybe even 10,000. I was taking 30,000 IUs of vitamin D3 daily, and it severely helped reduce the inflammation. Vitamin D3 is probably the number one anti-inflammatory supplement that you could take. And before you get ahead of yourself, vitamin D3 is not going to become toxic in your body. You would have to be taking hundreds of thousands of IUs daily for months on end to ever see anything like that. And if you ask any doctor or any physician that does blood work, have they ever seen a vitamin D3 toxicity? They cannot name you a time, or maybe like once in like a specific scenario. But therapeutic doses of vitamin D3 can be very powerful, especially for injuries like this. It doesn't have to be a forever thing, but in the short term, it definitely helped diminish that low back pain, as well as nerve health, which, speaking of nerve health, Dr. Berg also put me on to B vitamins, a B complex and B12 specifically to help with nerve pain. If you're getting sciatica from a herniated disc, it's because the disc is bulging into your nerve, and that's what feels like electricity shooting down your leg. Things like the vitamin D and the B12 and the other B vitamins can help calm down your nerves. Now, if you are taking vitamin D3, you want to make sure that you combine it with a K2, because vitamin D3 increases the amount of calcium in your arteries. Calcium is what makes up arterial plaque, which is bad for blood flow, but what you want to do is combine it with a K2, because that K2 will help shuttle the calcium into your bones. Combine that with the Playboy potion and you're in an even better spot. Other supplements that I want to reference here are going to be turmeric or curcumin. It's the same plant. If you're going to take that, you want to combine it with black pepper to activate it. Frankincense and boswellia are two other ones that I supplemented with as well. In this time, I also made sure to double my dose of magnesium so I was sleeping better and honestly just relax across my entire body. Magnesium is very important for your nervous system as well. And on top of that, I did taurine too, which is really going to reduce cortisol. In this period, I was trying to do everything I could to keep my stress low. My mind, my body, everything to keep stress low. And that's why I was able to make such a crazy recovery in such a short amount of time. So again, I want to thank Mark Ripito, Mac Ward, Ajac, Luis Castellon, Brendan Backstrom, and Dr. Eric Berg. You guys saved me, all by the grace of God. Please, if you found this useful, share it with somebody that needs to hear it, especially if they're going through pain. And please, even if you're not going through an injury yourself, start implementing some of the stuff that you learned here in this video so you can bulletproof your body. And I pray that you never have to go through anything like this in your entire life. Shoot any comments or questions you have below and follow for the next one.